The first question we've got for Mark is actually come from someone, Mark, that says they've worked with you before. His name is Chris Martin. And his question is that he knows that you're very forward-thinking in your attitude towards partnering with pharma for the benefit of patients. Unfortunately, he feels the majority of your colleagues in the NHS are not. We assume this is because we're seen as interested in profits and our motives for partnering are questionable, i.e. lack of trust. Mark, can you share the thoughts on this and suggest what we as industry can do to change these perceptions?
Okay. Hi, Chris. That's a very fair question, and I think that your general analysis is absolutely right. Since moving back into a mainstream NHS role, which I'm now in, I've been I continue to be quite surprised at some of the attitudes that colleagues display towards the pharmaceutical industry. So I think we need to begin by understanding why that is the case. And from speaking to some of the people that I work with quite closely, I think their interactions with pharma are very different to those that I had, particularly when I worked in my national role. They still receive lots of kind of cold calls or unwanted attention. There is still quite a large element of the pharmaceutical industry being the people who will pay for the sandwiches at the practice team meeting, and I think that quite a lot of that tends to fuel a perception which is quite different to my own, but is entirely legitimate and reflects the experiences that they've had of working with industry. So I think that is a little bit of a challenge. What can industry do about it? Well, I clearly suppose some of that is to continue on the journey that I know industry is already on, to move away from the kind of direct sales model, to move away from the kind of freebies and all that kind of thing, which I think has undoubtedly over the years harmed the reputation of the industry. I think perhaps more specifically, I think that it's about finding the people who are willing to have the conversations and building local relationships. But I would entirely agree with the basis of your question that it's still starting from a relatively low place, I suppose.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Mark, for giving us your insights there. This question will be for both of you, but we'll start with Mark on this, and then Jose, if you wanted to give your answer afterwards. What do you think the #1 mistake that you see from drug manufacturers when they're trying to create value propositions is?
For me?
Mark, if you wanted to go ahead with that first, and then Jose will have your answer straight after that.
Okay, so probably I would say the #1 mistake, and it builds very much on what Jose talked about in his presentation, it is perhaps to fail to pay sufficient attention to benefits in the real world and the challenges in taking account of whether people take the medicines in the way that they are supposed to take them to get the benefits that are claimed for them. So that whole kind of real life versus clinical trials issue that Jose was talking about, I'm not sure I describe that as a mistake. That may be a significant challenge for the industry, more than a mistake. But nonetheless, I think it's a key issue because it means that benefits that are claimed are not necessarily the same as the benefits that are experienced.
Perfect. That's great. So, Jose, I'd be keen to hear your perspective on that as well. What do you think the #1 mistake is?
I think the #1 mistake is not to tell the truth. Because if I lost confidence with some company, it's very difficult to get that confidence again. This is a real situation that I have lived. Someone tells me that they are not presenting or they are not giving that some new treatment in some hospitals, or that they are waiting to our okay, and they don't do that. So that is very complicated for us. So, of course, to tell the truth, because later or sooner we are going to know what is going.
Perfect. Okay, that makes sense. So the message there really is making sure that farmer is 100% honest when they present with you, so you can make your decisions accordingly. Fantastic. Perfect. Thanks for that, Jose. Thanks, Mark. As another question, we've got, this is for both of you. Jose, maybe if you'd like to start with this one. Please name an example of a non-medicine service from pharma companies that you value. Non-medicine, so this is sort of a value beyond the pill, so perhaps it's a method of delivering a medicine, or something that's not actually the medicine itself.
I value, I really don't know, maybe when some help in I don't know information, but some help when we need to do some improvement in some hospitals. For example, to the monodosis, the implant some new work system. But always when we need it before than they offer it to us. Okay, we don't like to create a necessity when we don't have that necessity. I don't know if you understand me.
Okay, so you don't want them to create the problem. If you have the problem, you'll present them with it, and then you'll ask for the solution there.
Yes, that's the okay.
And your example was something within a hospital. You know, as
yes, in a hospital, for example, we need to have a new, I don't know, a new equipment, or we have the necessity to have our patient in to do a trial, something, or especially some equipment, and they help us with that equipment. That's fantastic for us.
Sure, perfect. Mark, what would be your perspective on this?
Okay, so for me, the number one non-medicine service that I would value would be anything that can assist us to achieve a higher level of compliance with NICE guidance or with recognised and published quality standards. You know, that may be something around working with primary care and with our member practices here in Barnsley, but something that helps me to achieve a higher level of compliance. Perhaps something that reduces variation in practice, which is a big issue. That could be around case finding individual patients, it could be around audit, it could be around something around practice facilitation. I think there's quite a lot of examples of collaborative projects and paid for services in that territory, but anything that helps deliver a higher level of compliance with NICE.
Okay, so it really is about compliance for you.
Well, compliance, but in the best sense of compliance with evidence-based quality standards that will improve the quality of health and healthcare.
Sure, perfect. That makes perfect sense. So another question for Jose here. Jose, the question is: do you see risk-sharing agreements being more appropriate to specific areas, i.e., specialist or expensive treatments?
No, I think that the main thing for risk sharing is that we can have a good indicator, okay? Because we can't have a problem if someone says that this is good and we say this is not good. Okay, so we need to have a very clear indicator that we can have a measurement, and then it's good for us and it's good for the pharmaceutical company. Of course, when it's expensive treatment, is better for us. But I don't have any specific area for that.
Okay, so it doesn't matter about the specialty treatment area. It's just as important for all areas. Is that right?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you, Jose. Okay, so just looking for the next question to go there. So we've got a question coming in now, sort of on the medical devices side. So it'll be interesting to see your perspectives on this, Mark. If you wanted to go ahead with this question, which is how different are the requirements for medical devices and/or software compared to pharmaceutical evaluations?
For me?
So medical devices and software compared to pharmaceutical interventions?
Evaluations.
Pharmaceutical evaluations, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Just before I do that, I wanted to just make a point on the question before, if I may,
Sure.
which was about the risk sharing thing. My sense of risk sharing in the NHS is that it's required some kind of investment in IT or some kind of systems work to enable you to collect the information that supports the risk sharing agreement. So my guess would be that those are going to be more appropriately targeted on the larger budgetary impact medicines, whether that's because they're high-cost drugs or because of their overall budgetary impact. So that was just a point I wanted to make then on the question about risk sharing. In terms of medical devices and software versus pharmaceutical evaluations, no, I can't initially think of why there would be any significant difference between those two at all. I think that the evaluation of medicines is much more developed, I guess, because we've been doing that. NICE has been around looking at medicines for much longer. Evaluations of medical devices, for example, are probably much more early stage for us. So I guess the medical devices and software side of it is developing. It's still developing, but I wouldn't see any huge difference in the approach that you would wish to take.
Sure. Okay, perfect. Thank you for that, Mark. So this is another question which I'll pose to both of you. Are you familiar with any concrete public-private partnerships? And if so, which one can you think of?
So public-private partnerships, I would talk about one that I came across in my previous role where the industry and EU payers came together to develop shared value frameworks relating to particular illnesses and medicines that pharmaceutical companies were seeking to develop, early stage compounds, at the early stage of drugs, new medicines being developed, were tested out against this value framework to come to an earlier view as to whether a new medicine will be likely to deliver sufficient value in that condition, and secondly, and perhaps more importantly, to shape the clinical data that would be required to support evaluation by the HTA bodies and, as a consequence of that, market access. That would be one example of a public-private partnership. In truth, I'm not sure that there are too many of those around, but I think that would be one.
Perfect. That's great. Thanks for that, Mark. Jose, I'd be interested to get your perspective on this as well.
In pharmacy here in my region, I don't know what's actually anyone public-private partnership. We don't have here in Spain so much partnership, at least in pharmacy. I think there are in other fields, but I can't say really.
That's no problem. Perfect. Okay, so there aren't any currently going in the Extremadura region. I mean, is this something that you wouldn't look at then, or is this just something that doesn't happen yet?
I would like to have some public-private partnership, but I think it's over me. I think it will be the regional government directly who must sit down and talk about that.
Okay. So perhaps that's something that people should approach you directly with to sort of have that conversation. Sure. Perfect.
Ben, it's perhaps worth saying that if you reflect on the practice in the NHS at a kind of national level in respect to the Department of Health and the ABPI have been talking about this kind of collaborative agenda in this country, I would say, for a large number of years. I would have thought about a decade, if not even longer. and yet still the number of, you tend to find the same case studies, the same examples, the same areas, the same people, talking about the same kind of things. So I think that, there's a journey of kind of evolution, the journey of kind of cultural change in the NHS, the journey of engagement with payers that was hinted at by your survey question at the beginning, where payer engagement is still growing in importance for the industry, shows that I think this is quite a long-term project. Yeah, having said that, I'd be optimistic that I think we are making progress. I just don't think it's perhaps as fast as it could be, and perhaps needs to be.
Perfect. Okay. And a question that leads on for that, Mark, actually, quite conveniently, really, is: do you feel that payers have allowed enough time for pharmaceuticals to adjust research timelines to what seems to be new, higher demands for comparative evidence? If comparative evidence was offered more, would the reward make it worthwhile?
Well, I think timescales are fundamentally misaligned, and I think that is a real challenge. I worked briefly for AstraZeneca, and somebody asked me about what did they think would be the NHS's attitude towards treatments for hepatitis in 2017. This was in about 2009 or something like that. And I was totally stumped by the question, because I don't know, even in 2013, about what the NHS is going to think about very much in 2017, because we just don't work on those timescales. And yet, for industry, given the timescales to develop new medicines, those are absolutely, the timescales that you need to work with. So I think we are significantly challenged in terms of a relatively short-term, politically influenced, publicly financed health service versus the timescales of drugs development on a global basis. So I think that's one of the challenges. Should we pay more? Should we pay appropriately if we get better comparative data? Yes, absolutely we should. Will we? I don't know. But I think that we should. I think in a sense it goes back to the importance of developing only medicines that are going to meet the value that payers wish to see. And part of the reason, to go back to Jose's point about why are new medicines more expensive than the ones they replace, well, part of that reason, I think, is because it costs a lot of money to develop a new medicine, and comparatively small numbers of new medicines make it to the market and secure significant access. So as payers, we end up picking up the costs of all those failures. Necessarily, it can't be any different. So it just reinforces, to my mind, the importance of being collaborative as early as possible.
So you think early collaboration is the best way forward? Pharma should be trying to reach out
to it's not in our interest that the industry spends, $1 billion or whatever it is to bring to market a medicine that we don't think meets our needs. It might be slightly more complicated than that, but yeah, I think as a payer, I think it's in our interests that you only bring to market medicines that are going to deliver value that we recognise, and we need to work together with you to help do that.
Absolutely. So, I mean, it seems quite clear. I mean, is it fair to say that with yourself, you're one of the more forward-thinking payers that is willing to have those early conversations?
I genuinely wouldn't describe it. I don't think it's about being forward-thinking. I happen to fall into a national role which gave me the opportunity to meet colleagues in the pharmaceutical industry, and it was part of my remit to encourage the uptake of cost-effective medicines and to improve the strategic relationship between the NHS and industry. So the consequence of that job that I happened to do for a little while, I've gained a set of perspectives that are relatively unique, and that's what you get today. But I don't think that necessarily constitutes forward thinking, or I will leave that as a judgment for others to make.
Sure. Okay. Thanks for that, Mark. Jose, did you have any opinions on this?
Yes, I think that early collaboration is cheaper and is better, and is what we need, really, but not only we as payer, but pharmaceutical companies too, because we don't need a new Me Too drug, or we don't need a treatment for 1 or 2 months life in oncology with no quality of life. So if they told to us, do you need something here that will be fine because we could see, we could have what we need. And another thing that I think is our mistake as payer. We should say we are going to pay this, only this. If your treatment is going to be more expensive than this, don't waste more money in this because we are not going to pay. That is our big mistake, administration mistake. But here in Spain, I think we are going to do something about it. Unless we are trying.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to let you know, we have just under 4 minutes left. So we are going to just see how many more questions we can squeeze in. So if you both could keep your answers fairly brief, that would be great. Jose, if we could start with you. In your presentation, you mentioned about the drug must be better. So how much better efficacy should a drug be to be classified as better for you?
That's very difficult. Really, that's the million-dollar question, because every time I say I need better drugs, how much better? I really don't know. Really, I don't know, because I must see the situation, the patient life, quality of life. I think it's very important that a patient that can't go out from home and with some treatment he can walk. That's fantastic. But I really don't know how to establish what is how much better. It's different in every treatment, every drug, every pathology.
Okay, perfect. Mark, we've got just under 2 minutes, so if you could give a very quick answer to that as well, that would be fantastic.
Sorry, I wasn't expecting that question to come to me at all, Ben. So I wasn't concentrating. Can you remind me of the question, please? Oh, how much better? Okay. Well, as a starting point, if it's going to cost 10% more money, I want to see 10% more benefit. But other than that, I think it's as Jose said, it's a very difficult question to answer. I suppose the other thing you might say is that in times of austerity, then the bar is understandably going to be raised a little bit harder. And if you wanted a really broad answer, apparently expenditure on cycle helmets delivers a return of £50 for every £1 that we spend as a nation getting our kids to wear cycle helmets. That's quite an impressive rate of return.
It is. Thanks for that, Mark. So I'm afraid that's all the questions we have time for. But I'd like to thank Mark and Jose very much for joining us today. You've both been great, and it's been fantastic to hear your insights. So just to conclude, Mark and Jose and a host of 10 more payers and HTA representatives will be joining us at the Payers Forum Europe in Berlin in October. So I'm going to send a link to the event to you all now. And if you could have a look at that, then you'll be able to see the website there, and I'd strongly recommend that you download the brochure also. So thank you very much for joining us today.